What's up, folks? Welcome back to Tactical Tortoise. My name is Trevi, and about a month ago, we talked on a short about this article, talking about the new Chaos Demons Codex. This was back in the beginning of July, and covered some of the changes that were upcoming in the 9th edition variety of the Chaos Demons book. But just this weekend, we've been getting a smorgasbord of articles about this Chaos Demons Codex, so let's talk about some of the new previews that have been coming out of Warhammer community about the update to Chaos Demons. First off, last Friday, August 5th, 2022, we see an article about the new mechanic for the Codex that is demonic invulnerability. Now, this is a brand new mechanic that we've never seen before. I think it has the potential to change a lot of things about how 40k is designed in the future. Previously, Demons had a built-in invulnerable save. Typically, it was 5+, but some things like having a Tzeentch Demon would improve that invulnerable save, and that's been changed in a pretty big way. So, first off, we can see here that all of the new demon profiles now have this D-save characteristic. That's the demonic save, rather than a normal armor save, which we could see on the previous datasheet stat block. So it looks like, with maybe some exceptions, these demons will not have a normal armor save. Instead, they're going to get this demonic invulnerability save, which is effectively an unmodifiable invulnerable save. That is to say, it's not actually an invulnerable save, which means that things that interact with invulnerable saves are not going to be able to interact with this save in particular. Now, this is a little funky, obviously, since more and more mechanics have been being introduced slowly but surely that ignore or modify invulnerable saves. And now, demons are going to be totally immune to those effects. At this stage of the game, there aren't too many weapons that punch through invulnerable saves. We can think of the obvious ones like Tau railguns and their relic plasma rifle. Punchy melee attacks like the Incarn and the Nightbringer are going to be able to ignore invulnerable saves. But outside a couple of exceptions, that's basically the entirety of the list. And I do understand the necessity to give demons some level of defense against factions that have a lot of these mechanics, but it doesn't feel to me like these mechanics are prevalent enough to warrant a whole new rule that specifically ignores the invulnerable save ignoring rules. So, I don't know. I'm not sure how I feel about that. I don't really like it. I appreciate it when games build off of their existing mechanics rather than introduce brand new ones just to kind of plug holes in the game, the meta game, but it is what it is. It does look like demons are going to be significantly more resilient, especially against ranged attacks. As we can see here, Bloodletters have a 5+ built-in demonic save. Normally, that's essentially just their 5+ invulnerable save that they had in the previous version, but they also have a 4+ save specifically against shooting. That second characteristic is against shooting attacks only. And we can see a similar thing happening with Pink Horrors here, where we see Pink Horrors become significantly less resilient in melee, only a 6+ demonic save rather than the 4+ invulnerable save that they enjoyed previously, but they do have a 3+ against ranged attacks, which means that if Pink Horrors are in a shooting fight with you, unless you have an incredibly high volume of attacks that are able to overload that 3+ save, they will probably be able to win. But as soon as you engage them in melee, that entire unit is going to have a bad time, especially since we also see, interestingly, their leadership reduced. Now, these stat blocks also include some profile changes. What we don't have so far are the special abilities that are tied to these datasheets. So we can't really get a holistic view at what these units are actually going to look like in the new codex, but we can kind of suss things out. First off, Bloodletters are going up to a base toughness of 4. I think that's pretty warranted. Their toughness 3 previously made them pretty interesting as a glass cannon, but it did make them die to small arms fire a little bit more quickly than you would expect. Although with that new 4+ demonic save against ranged attacks, I don't know, maybe can stick around a while. Although with the 4+ demonic save and T4 as the only things protecting them against gunfire, and they go to a 5+ save in melee, they are still going to be very much a glass cannon, especially if you have a good counterpunch in melee and they don't one-shot you, then you will be able to kill a couple of them on the way out. And again, their leadership has been reduced, so killing a few of them at a time may force those leadership checks to fail and start forcing combat attrition across the entire unit, which would be bad. They also went up to strength 5, but we don't know if there's a strength characteristic on their Hellblade weapon, which could push them to a higher strength. Previously, they were strength 5 because of their Unstoppable Ferocity ability, which gave them +1 strength in attacks on the charge. And again, I don't know if that is baked into this profile. This is the same offensive profile that they would have when charging previously, and like we've been seeing with a lot of the Astartes codexes, where abilities like Shock Assault is being baked into each datasheet, we may see that happening here. So this actually could not be that big of a change. The other thing that we don't know is whether or not they have a hit bonus. Previously, they had a hit bonus when they were 20 or more models, and we're not sure if that's the case now. So there are still a lot of open questions with these datasheets before we start taking things away. Obviously, the biggest thing is that unignorable, unmodifiable, invulnerable save, which is a pretty big deal. Now, we also see, speaking of these Khorne Chaos Demons, some big announcements about them. It is August 8th today as of recording. 8/8, and 8 being the sacred number of Khorne. That is Khorne Day, so we get a big Khorne drop, and we talk about a bunch of different Khorne demons, although specifically not Bloodthirsters yet, which is a little bit sad. First off, we see some profile upgrades to Flesh Hounds, going up to movement 12 and getting an additional strength and attack. Although once again, we do not know if that Unstoppable Ferocity ability is still there, in which case this actually wouldn't be that much of a change. Although we do see their new demonic saving throw ability, 5+ in melee and 4+ in range, just like the Bloodletters. Interestingly, no change to leadership for these guys, but I think that might be because they don't have a unit champion. So it may be that the unit champions in the standard demon units are going to be a lot higher leadership than the base demons that they're bringing with them. Now, they also have this Savage Pounce ability, which is going to give them +1 damage on the charge. We don't know the profile of their weapon to begin with, so it may be that that goes to even damage 3, which actually would be a pretty reasonable threat. And if they get a high strength or have any wound bonuses, they could be a pretty reasonable hammer unit that could even knock down some heavily armored opponents. Now, we also see some abilities for the character Skull Taker. He does get full rerolls against character units because he likes taking their heads, and I like this little bit of a flavor ability, although I don't know how much it's actually going to come into play. Every time he destroys a character, he increases the range of all of his aura abilities by 3 inches, up to a maximum of 12. So he probably starts at 6, so if he kills 2 characters over the course of the game, it's going to max those out to a really big radius. That said, I'm not sure that's going to matter too much. It does say that his Lord of Decapitations ability is a targeted command phase buff, which gives +1 to hit, so I guess we do source a hit bonus on the Bloodletters there, so probably unnecessary that they have retain their bonus for having 20 more models. I think that probably goes away. But it also calls out that the Herald of Khorne ability is also increased, and we don't exactly know what that is yet, but I would hazard to guess it would be a reroll 1s to hit aura. So probably Khorne demons within 6 inches reroll 1s to hit. That would go up to 9 inches as soon as he kills a character. That said, you're usually killing characters in melee in the mid to late game, and that's not usually when you have a lot of units clustered together. So I'm actually not sure that this ability is particularly good, although full rerolls against characters isn't too bad, especially if his base profile is impressive. And given the fact that it's kind of not impressive right now. He does have a 3 damage weapon and 4 attacks, 5 on the charge, which is like totally fine, but it's not really anything to shake a stick at. If he gets a big buff to his melee profile, I could see Skull Taker being pretty scary as a little bit of an assassin there, although I think he needs to be a little bit faster. Now, we also see a stratagem previewed for Khorne here in the Frenetic Bloodlust strat. It has a modal cost, 1 CP or 2 CP, depending on the mode in which you're using it. The 2 CP version, I think, is the most interesting. Allows you at the start of any fight phase, doesn't have to be your own fight phase, make a normal move of 6 inches towards the closest visible enemy unit. So obviously there's a couple riders on here. If it happens at the start of the fight phase and you aren't in engagement range of enemies, which means that there is no way to make this get you to attack in that fight phase, unless your opponent piles into the model or something like that. But what you can do is move in up to outside engagement range of enemy models, and if they're fighting, you can potentially try to encourage them to come in and engage your Bloodletter unit. And because it's not a heroic intervention, it actually doesn't make you targetable by enemies, which is pretty cool. I think the big benefit of this is using it in your opponent's fight phase, and if you have a unit that can see an enemy and you need to get some additional threat range on them, then you can pop that 2 CP, move 6 inches, then as soon as their fight phase is over, it goes back to your movement phase, and you can now move those models and then charge with them subsequently in your own turn. That's probably going to be the biggest use case, but it also has the second mode where if you're already in engagement range of enemy units, you can make a pile in with your own unit. That does have some implications. We did just talk about using the fight phase a lot in previous videos with both the basic tactics and advanced tactics about fight phase movement, and I highly recommend you go check those 2 videos out if you want to see all of the ways that you can use pile in moves like this. But one of the biggest ones is the classic adage of ABB, always be basing, where if your opponent is trying to do some chicanery or in their own fight phase after having charge to get onto your objectives or to surround your units, you can pop a CP for this, make a pile and move with your own unit, and put the majority of their unit or all their frontline models in base contact with your own, preventing them from making any combat maneuvers, which means that they wouldn't be able to do any of that stuff. So it's a really good ability to keep in mind, especially if you're playing against the Khorne Demon army, because some of your combat maneuvering may just be blanked by the stratagem. Alternatively, it can also be used to compound your own combat phase movement, where you can get more models into melee, or you can rush models onto objectives or get them into a better position for the subsequent fight. I think there are going to be some situations where this comes up, but I think the biggest one is going to be this 6-inch move at the end of your opponent's turn to increase your own threat range. Now, that said, there are some downsides to it. I think the biggest one being that the enemy unit that you're moving towards has to be visible, which can be a little bit awkward, especially if it's in the early game and you're trying to hide from enemy ranged attacks. You do have that 4+ demonic save, but you don't really want to be taking a lot of shots, especially if you have somebody with a high volume of attacks, which means a lot of times these Khorne melee units are going to be hiding early, and that means that if they're behind obscuring terrain and your opponent isn't pushing out super far forward, you're actually not going to have a closest visible enemy unit, so your models won't be able to move. So that's one thing to keep in mind. This isn't just going to be a blanket plus 6 inches to your threat range, assuming you're going second effectively. It also does require your opponent to sort of put some things into your line of sight and allow you to turn that ability on. There's no range to it, so if even one model in your unit can see a single model in an opposing unit, you can move towards that unit. And again, this is towards, not directly towards, so it's very similar to a combat movement. So you can do a combat orbit, essentially, to move 6 inches kind of laterally towards that unit if you want to, in order to get the maximum movement out of this ability. And so far, that's it. That's all of the spoilers that we have for the Chaos Demons Codex, although it looks like some exciting stuff. You know, there have been some rumors going around about the power of greater demons in the new Codex and how they're going to be enormous, ridiculously difficult to kill models that are huge, have huge impacts on the game, and I really hope that that's the case. Greater demons have been sad for way too long, and it's time for Chaos Demons to come back and do some fighting. They've been kind of a joke of a faction throughout almost the entirety of 9th edition, and I hope the time is over and we can actually see Chaos Demons be a powerhouse in the metagame. That would be cool. It remains to be seen. I don't know if I'm super excited about these Bloodletter profiles so far. I don't know if Games Workshop has really figured out where Khorne wants to sit mechanically compared to the other sub-factions in Chaos Demons. They sort of have 3 melee sub-factions. Slaanesh is fast, Nurgle is tanky and is supposed to have protracted combats, and Khorne, I guess, just does a lot of damage, but it turns out being tanky or fast are generally better in 40k than just having a high damage output, because if you have a high damage output but you can't deliver it because your models are slow and die too quickly, then it doesn't matter. And that's always been Khorne's problem, and I'm not entirely sure that that has changed just based on these spoilers. We'll have to see the remainder of the Codex, although I'm sure that, you know, obviously the 6-inch move ability is certainly going to help, and I'm sure that there's going to be some other big charge bonuses for these Bloodletters and potentially some special abilities that increase their damage output, which will make the unit much more terrifying. Anyway, that's it for me today, everyone. Thanks so much for watching. Remember to keep it classy, folks, and have happy wargaming.